The man who walked into a bar and never walked out. Part 1. Hundreds of people filled a crowded bar in Columbus, Ohio on the night of March 31, 2006. One of them was 27-year-old medical student Brian Shaffer. Security cameras recorded him entering the Ugly Tuna Saloona shortly after 1:15 a.m. Friends saw him smiling only minutes earlier, then he disappeared. No confirmed witness ever saw him again. Nearly 20 years later, investigators still cannot explain how a man vanished from one of the busiest entertainment districts in the city. Brian Shaffer was born on February 25, 1979, and grew up in Pickerington, Ohio. Intelligent, outgoing, and ambitious, he attended the Ohio State University College of Medicine, determined to become a doctor. But 2006 had already changed his life. Only weeks earlier, his mother Renee died after a long battle with cancer. Friends said Brian struggled with the loss but remained optimistic. He was looking forward to a spring break trip to Miami with his girlfriend, Alexis Wagoner. Nothing suggested he planned to disappear on March 31st. Brian spent part of the day with his father before meeting his close friend Clint Florence. After dinner, they joined Clint's friend Meredith Reed and headed to the popular South Campus Gateway District. Around 10 p.m., they arrived at the Ugly Tuna Saloona. The bar was crowded with students celebrating the weekend. At approximately 1:15 a.m., surveillance cameras captured Brian outside the entrance talking casually with two women he had just met. Witnesses later said he appeared relaxed and cheerful. The women entered the bar. Brian followed. It became the last confirmed image of him. Around closing time, Clint and Meredith couldn't find Brian. Assuming he had already left, they went home. The next morning, Brian never returned to his apartment. He never contacted Alexis before their planned vacation. His family reported him missing. Police immediately began reconstructing his final movements. The surveillance footage created an astonishing mystery. Brian was clearly seen entering the bar. Investigators could not conclusively find him leaving. The main entrance was covered by cameras, yet no recording definitively showed Brian walking back out. Detectives carefully reviewed every frame and identified as many patrons as possible. Still nothing. The investigation revealed one important detail. The bar occupied the second floor of a commercial complex that was partially under construction. Behind the public areas were employee corridors, service exits, and construction access points, some without camera coverage. Could Brian have left through one of those unseen routes? Police interviewed employees, security guards, managers, and construction workers. No evidence proved he used those exits. Then another puzzle emerged. Brian's cell phone continued receiving calls after he disappeared. Most went directly to voicemail, but on one occasion the phone appeared to ring before disconnecting. Investigators couldn't determine whether this was a genuine signal or a network anomaly. His bank accounts remained untouched, his credit cards were never used, his passport showed no activity. It was as if Brian had simply vanished, and that was only the beginning. Part 2. As investigators dug deeper, the surveillance footage remained both the strongest clue and the biggest obstacle. Detectives repeatedly reviewed recordings from the Gateway complex, hoping Brian had simply blended into the crowd. They never found definitive proof. While the main entrance was monitored, parts of the building, including service corridors and construction areas, were not. It was physically possible Brian left through one of those routes, but no witness saw him. No evidence supported it. Brian's friends cooperated fully. Neither Clint Florence nor Meredith Reed reported an argument, suspicious behavior, or signs Brian wanted to disappear. The two women Brian had spoken with outside the bar told police the same story. Brian seemed happy. Nothing appeared unusual. Although devastated by his mother's recent death, friends said he was making plans for the future. His upcoming vacation, medical school, and long-term relationship all suggested someone expecting life to continue. His cell phone remained another mystery. Days after Brian vanished, one call briefly rang before disconnecting, fueling hope he was still alive. Experts, however, warned that temporary network behavior could produce the same result. No location was ever recovered. Meanwhile, investigators found no financial activity, no withdrawals, no purchases, no employment records, no verified sightings. Search teams combed nearby buildings, parking garages, rooftops, wooded areas, and sections of the Olentangy River. Nothing connected to Brian was ever found. As national media picked up the story, theories spread rapidly. Some believed Brian never left the building. Others argued investigators simply missed him on the surveillance footage. Experienced detectives urged caution. Security cameras are valuable but not perfect. Blind spots, crowds, and poor angles can hide critical moments. Years later, investigators admitted no single explanation fit every known fact. By the end of the initial investigation, detectives had established Brian's timeline only until his final appearance entering the bar. Everything afterward remained unknown. Part 3. With no physical evidence, investigators considered several possible explanations. Theory 1. Brian left through an unmonitored exit. This remains the most widely accepted possibility. Because parts of the building lacked camera coverage, Brian may have exited through a service corridor or construction area. But while possible, no evidence proves he did. Even if he left unnoticed, investigators still cannot explain what happened afterward. Theory 2. An accident. Some believe Brian successfully left the complex before suffering an accident. Large searches found no belongings, no remains, and no evidence supporting this scenario. Theory 3. Foul play. Police never ruled out foul play. Yet witnesses reported no disturbance inside the bar, and investigators found no evidence of a struggle. If Brian became the victim of a crime, detectives believe it likely happened after he left the building. But without knowing where he went, the theory remains impossible to prove. Theory 4. A voluntary disappearance. Others suggest Brian intentionally abandoned his life after losing his mother. Investigators consider this unlikely. He left behind his family, girlfriend, medical career, and future plans. He never accessed his money, renewed official documents, or created any verified digital trail. For someone starting a new life, he left remarkably little evidence. One detail continues to fuel debate. Several days after Brian disappeared, his cell phone briefly rang before disconnecting. Was the phone switched on? Was someone carrying it? Or was it only a technical glitch? No one has ever answered that question. Brian's father, Randy Shaffer, spent years searching for answers and keeping the case in the public eye. In 2008, he died in an unrelated accident after being struck by a falling tree during a storm. He never learned what happened to his son. Nearly 20 years later, Brian Shaffer remains officially missing. The investigation is still open. No confirmed sightings have ever been verified. No forensic evidence has explained his disappearance. Detectives believe Brian almost certainly left the building somehow. The real mystery is what happened next. That is why this case continues to fascinate investigators. A young man entered one of Columbus's busiest bars. His final confirmed movements were captured on surveillance. Then every reliable clue simply ended. In an age of security cameras, smartphones, GPS tracking, and digital records, Brian Shaffer disappeared almost without a trace. Sometimes history's greatest mysteries do not happen in remote forests or abandoned islands. Sometimes they happen under bright city lights, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses. And somehow one final step is never seen.